guys, my name is Nabila Swaila binti Muhammad Nasri.
My name is Nur Afika binti Muhammad.
My name is Muhammad Isnad Haji bin Kuzaini.
And today we are your presenter. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning my friends and our lecturer for Nurul Azrin Arifin. It is an honor for us today to deliver a presentation. The topic we will present today is Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia. From this globe, as we can see, which one of the parts of the region Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia? Yes, true, you got it guys, the driest region in the world, Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia. In Southwest Asia is also known as the Middle East. Southwest Asia does in fact from the southwest corner of the continent of Asia with Europe to the northwest of it and Africa to the southwest of it. And right here is Saudi Arabia, the largest country on this peninsula. Here it is called the Arabian Peninsula. To the west we have Turkey. A small piece of Turkey is existing on two different continents. The major water features, the Red Sea, located between Saudi Arabia and Africa. To the southeast of the Arabian Peninsula, we have the Arabian Sea, which also borders India. Running north of the Arabian Peninsula and south of Iran is the oil-rich region known as the Persian Gulf. There is another important waterway here as well. A canal was built connecting the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea in east. This is called the Suez Canal and it was Nile River. Now we focus on the line that I draw. It's the border with another region. Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia is the region encompassing 6,000 miles, which is 9,700 km, west to east from Morocco in Northwest Africa to Iran in Southwestern Asia. And a north-south distance of about 3,000 miles, which is 4,800 km from Turkey on Europe's southeastern corner to Sudan, which extends deep into Africa. The physical area of this rim is divided into two regions, Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia, includes 21 countries. The countries in the Northern Africa region include the countries bordering the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, Western Sahara, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Sudan. Meanwhile, the second region, Southwest Asia, includes Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Oman, Syria, Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Iran, and Bahrain. For your information, the Arabian Peninsula is the largest peninsula in the world. The land on the Mediterranean Sea's eastern shores is often referred to as the Levant. The countries include Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine. On the other hand, the peninsula that constitutes the Asian portion of Turkey is called as Anatolia, also Asia Minor, which has territory in both Europe and Asia, but most of its land lies in Asia. The portion of Turkey that lies to the west of Istanbul is on the European continent, which connects Turkey with European community. However, Cyprus is a small island in the eastern Mediterranean Sea that is technically a European country and is a member of the European Union. And this is the flag of countries of Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia. The Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia have a moderately high rate of population growth compared to other world regions, but there is a considerable range between countries in this race. The population growth rate compares the average annual percent change in population resulting from a surplus of births over deaths and the balance of migrants entering and leaving a country. The rate may be positive or negative. The highest is 4.25% in Syria, followed by 2.69% in the Sudan and 2.54% in Western Sahara. On the other side, Lebanon has the lowest rate of growth at negative 6.68%, with Turkey and Tunisia close behind at 0.45 and 0.85% respectively. Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia experience the highest rate of population growth of any region in the world over the past century. Improvement in human survival, particularly during the second half of the 20th century, lead to rapid population growth in Northern Africa and Southwestern Asia and other less developed regions. The introduction of modern medical service and public health interventions such as antibiotic immunizations and sanitation caused death rates to drop rapidly in the developing world after 1950, while the decline in birth rates lagged behind, resulting in high rates of natural increase. In other words, the surplus of births over deaths. Here is the total of population growth in Northern Africa. Northern Africa population is equivalent to 3.16% of the total world population. Northern Africa ranks number 3 in Africa among sub-regions ranked by population. The population density in Northern Africa is 32 per km². The total land area is 7,769,438 km². 52.4% of the population is urban. The median age in Northern Africa is 25.5 years. Next, the total of population growth in Southwestern Asia. Western Asia population is equivalent to 3.5% of the total world population. Western Asia ranks number 4 in Asia among sub-regions ranked by population. The population density in Western Asia is 58 per km². The total land area is 4,805,058 km². 72.8% of the population is urban. The median age in Western Asia is 28.2 years. Dry weather dominates the Middle East and North Africa. At least 3/4 of the region has average yearly rain of fewer than 10 inches, which is 25 cm. But sometimes localized cold fronts release moisture that allows plants, animals, and small populations of people to live in the desert. The region's climates have the comparatively large daily and seasonal range of temperature characteristic of dry lands. Desert nights can be surprisingly cool. Most days and nights are cloudless, so the heat absorbed on the desert surface during the day is lost by radiative cooling into the atmosphere at night. Summers in the lowlands are very hot almost everywhere, daily for weeks or even months at a time. Human settlements located near sand seas often experience the unpleasant combination of high temperatures and hot, sand-laden winds, creating the sandstorms known locally by such names such as "Sinmu" that bring means by poison. In general, winters are mild across the region, but cold winters and snowfalls, even the glaciers, are accurate in the mountainous areas of Iran and Turkey. The locals are in the only zone of humid continental climate in the region. In the fewer areas of the region, there is enough rainfall to support dry farming during the summer. In the southwestern Arabian Peninsula, a monsoonal climate brings summer rainfall and autumn harvest to Yemen and Oman. Due to hills and mountains, the elevation indoors precipitation, the mountains receive much more rainfall than surrounding lowland areas.
So now we will moving on with the environmental problem in North Africa and Southwestern Asia. The first environmental problem is poor soil and deforestation in sub-Saharan Africa. There is two reasons why this environmental issue occurred. Firstly, it happened due to deforestation. Deforestation is the process when the forest being destroyed to make way for human development. For example, they have to cut off a lot of trees in order to build up the city with a numerous building. Secondly, continuous farming and overgrazing of animals have destroyed the grassland and forests of the Sahel. Grasslands are one of the most widespread of all the major vegetation types of the world. However, due to human manipulation of the land has significantly altered the natural vegetation, creating artificial grassland of cereal crops, pasture, and other areas that require some form of repetitious unnatural disturbance such as cultivation, heavy grazing, burning, or mowing to persist. The second environmental issue is desertification. Desertification is referred to the process of the desert expanding into areas that were formerly farmland, which is the Sahel is one part of North Africa that experiencing that severe problem regarding desertification. When the soil is overused, it will turn to be poor and powdery. There is two reasons that bring desertification, which is one of it is poor farming practices. Poor farming practices are the shortcut that destroy their environment to the point that the environment can no longer sustain normal, healthy growth. Example, it includes using excessive chemical, over-tilling, and monocropping. Next, limited water supply. Majority of people in North Africa and Southwestern Asia has trouble getting enough water for survive. They are facing the struggle which is a very little of clean water for drink and washing. This situation occurred due to various reasons. Drought is one of the reasons there is limitation of water supply. A drought is an event of prolonged shortage in the water supply, whether atmospheric, surface water, or groundwater. A drought can last for months or years, or maybe can declare after a few as 15 days. Other than that is water pollution. The increasing of pollution was from factories and contamination. The contamination can be from animals and human waste. This is what really happened in Turkey, Israel, and other countries in North Africa and Southwestern Asia. So, clean water is very essential for basic health and sanitation. If there is lack of water, clean water, it can bring to an increment in frequency of skin and eye infection. Proceed with cultural history for North Africa and Southwestern Asia. The first aspect is religion. North Africa and Southwestern Asia is considered one of the great cradle of human civilization. It is also the hot area for several of the world major religions. These religions have changed the global cultural landscape, but have also led to tension and conflict throughout the region. Three religions in particular, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The oldest of this Abrahamic faith is Judaism. Judaism is a monotheistic religion, meaning that it is defined by a belief in one God. Jews believe that Abraham established the first covenant with God, and the central Jewish text, the Torah, include a discussion of creation of the world as well as the establishment of this covenant. The first Jewish temple built by Solomon was constructed in modern-day Israel. The Babylonians destroyed both the city of Jerusalem and Solomon temple in 587 BCE. And many scholars note that this event led to the creation of the written Hebrew Bible, what Christians term the Old Testament. The temple was reconstructed by Herod beginning in the 1st century BCE. However, this region has long been subject to invasion and conquest, and in 70 CE, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans. This event prompted large-scale Jewish immigration from the region. Christianity is another Abrahamic monotheistic religion. It developed from the life and teaching of Jesus, a Jewish preacher who was born in 4 BCE in Judea, which is located in modern-day Israel. Jesus believed that the end time were near and emphasized love as the central religious doctrine. He was crucified by the Romans around 30 CE, a method of execution typically reserved for those who challenged the established social order. Originally, Christianity was a second of Judaism, but it eventually developed into its own distinct religious tradition. Christianity to create an agreed upon doctrine through some of these decisions were disputed. Over the year, Christianity developed distinct branches and denominations. The first of this division, known as the Great Schism, came in 1054 CE and was as much a product of geography as theology. This split divided the Eastern Orthodox from the Roman Catholic Church. In 1570 CE, the German monk Martin Luther penned the 1905 Thesis, which criticized Roman Catholic doctrine and began the Protestant Reformation. The religion that is most characteristic of North Africa and Southwestern Asia today is Islam. Islam teaches in the existence of one God and emphasizes the belief in Muhammad as the last prophet. Followers of Islam are known as Muslim. Islam built upon much of Jewish and Christian theologies like Judaism. Islam view Abraham, Noah, Moses, and others as prophet of God. Also like Judaism, Islam has a monotheistic understanding of God. God is simply known in Islam as Allah, from the Arabic al-Ilah, meaning the God. Islam teaches that Jesus was a prophet, and much of the story of his death and life in the Quran is similar to the story in the New Testament. The main language in North Africa and Southwest Asia is Arabic, among many others. For example, Turkish is spoken in Turkey, Hebrew is spoken in Israel, Persian is spoken in Iran, and other countries like Egypt and Algerian have French and English as a second language. One of applicable organization is Middle East and North Africa. Organization was an organized group of people with a particular purpose, such as a business or government department. The Middle East and North Africa is a different locale, influenced by monetary and political changes, however, with a potential for more and better development. It profits by a special geographic area with admittance to huge business sector, a youthful and progressively instructed populace, and similar preference in a few areas. For example, fabricating sustainable power source and the travel industry. MENA economy are executing changes to improve financial development, administration structure, expansion, business, private area advancement, and honesty. There is 4 OECD and the Middle East and North Africa activities with the region, which is the first one is MENA OECD Competitiveness Program, and the second one is MENA OECD Governance Program, both supporting changes to prepare speculation, private area advancements, and business as main impetus for comprehensive development and work. The third activity is Morocco Country Program, which is supporting 16 activities work around the vital region of seriousness, public administration, and social consideration. Next, G7 Dove Partnership. It is participating in a multilateral stage offering political and budgetary help to Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Jordan, Libya, and Yemen, with the point of cultivating great administration, common society commitment, work creation, SME improvement investment, money-related consideration, and ladies strengthening. And the last one is Arab DAC Dialogue on Development, which is supporting Arab supplier of improvement co-activity in their endeavors to better coordinate their advancements help exercise.
We're gonna proceed to economic activities in each sub-region. First, for North Africa, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia are rising middle-income countries. Many of sub-region's economic connections are noteworthy to Spain, France, and Italy. Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, in particular, retain close ties with France and have strong connections to markets in Europe for selling products, buying goods, and sending immigrant labor. 45% of Morocco's labor force is in agriculture, though agriculture accounts for only 17% of Morocco's GDP. Algeria and Morocco export citrus fruits, vegetables such as tomatoes and potatoes, and cut flowers for European markets. Morocco also exports cork from bark of the oak tree and fish, squid for export to Japan, and tuna. Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia also export phosphate for fertilizer. Tunisia has a small-scale industry, and Morocco's manufacturing sector is the least developed but includes substantial craft industries. In Morocco and Tunisia, tourism is a major source of income based on their sunshine, coastal location, historic and cultural sites, and stable political environments. Most tourists come from Northern Europe with its cool and rainy climate and high disposable incomes. Algeria and Libya export oil and natural gas and earn high incomes when oil prices are high. These fields account for about 95% of their export earnings, with monies accumulated for recent high oil prices, and the Algerian government launched a 5-year worth $286 billion development program in 2010 to upgrade Algeria's infrastructure and create jobs. Libya also made some steel and aluminium. However, wealth is not shared within the country. Reforms introduced in the mid-2000s and creating more opportunities for many and helping to diversify the economy. Nevertheless, the arid environment means that Libya must import more than 75% of its food. North African countries also have growing government bureaucracies and service occupations in education and healthcare. They are challenged to both fund these growing bureaucracies and create jobs for growing populations. Next, for the Nile River Valley. The Nile River Valley provides a life-giving water supply to Egypt and Sudan that has sustained a human presence in the dry Eastern Sahara since the early days of farming and civilizations. For Egypt, following the 1959 Nile Waters Agreement between Egypt and Sudan, the Aswan High Dam was constructed on Lake Nasser in 1970. The Egyptian government hoped that the electricity generated from the dam would fuel economic development through manufacturing. Though many industries emerged, government control has allowed them to age. They require modernization and considerable investment. Today, Egypt largely earns income through exports of oil, cotton, and textiles, but must import machinery, food, chemicals, and wood. Its main trading partners are the United States, European countries, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and China. Suez Canal's revenues also contribute to Egypt's income. Egypt's agreement to a ceasefire and closer relations with Israel in the 1970s earned its massive aid from the United States. Since 1979, Egypt has received an average of over $2 billion per year in economic and military aid from the United States. It continues to be the second largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid after Israel. Egypt also benefited economically by its military involvement in the Gulf War in 1991. Gulf countries paid for Egypt's support, and the United States forgave approximately $6.7 billion in debt. Since the early 2000s, U.S. economic aid to Egypt has declined steadily. It has been diverted to Afghanistan and Iraq. Within Egypt, the Nile River Valley upstream to the south of Cairo is designated Upper Egypt. Incomes in Upper Egypt are half those of the rest of the country, and this area ranks poorly in infant mortality, adult literacy, health services, schools, and unemployment. Tourism based around Egypt's historic treasures, such as pyramids and temples along the Nile River, are important for the economy. Next, much support from the United States or the Soviet Union and the little it received from other Arab sponsors disappeared after the 1991 Gulf War. Years of civil war have destroyed production in the south, diverted northern resources to military expenditure, and hindered required reforms to obtain external funding from the World Bank. As the situation has improved, China, Japan, Indonesia, and Egypt have become Sudan's trading partners, with China buying almost 60% of its exports and supplying it with almost 22% of its imports in 2009. More than 80% of Sudan labor force works in agriculture and produces a third of GDP. Sudan exports cotton, sesame, livestock, groundnuts, gum Arabic, and sugar. Recent discoveries of oil also provide export income. The oil deposits occur in the Middle White Nile River based in southern Sudan. Chinese, Malaysian, Canadian, and Swedish oil companies provide support for their development. Although oil may be part of the solution to Sudan's problems, it also brings new ones. Evidence suggests that the Sudanese government used the oil income to purchase armaments to kill or remove inhabitants from the oil-producing area and oil pipeline zone, and to clear the area as a base for attacking other parts of the south. Although Sudan could, under peaceful circumstances, face its population civil war, drought, and the pressures of refugees from Eritrea, Chad, and other African countries have undermined its economic development. Thus, Sudan needs to import wheat. Its manufacturing sector is at an early stage of development. Textile factories, paper mills, and an oil refinery are all based around the capital, Khartoum, and there together they make up only a small part of the country's total product. Sudan needs to import manufactured goods, transport equipment, medicines, chemicals, and textiles. The poor economic situation means that Sudan is a major source country for human trafficking, enforced labor, and sexual exploitation. It is also a transit country for trafficked Ethiopians. Many trafficked individuals are sent to Arab Southwest Asia, especially Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Others are sent to help terrorists in Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Next, we can proceed to Arab Southwest Asia. Arab Southwest Asia has major economic difference between countries with high oil revenues and those that produce little or no oil. The different levels of income are reflected in the ownership of consumer goods and total income. For example, through representing about 22% of the sub-region's population, the Saudi Arabian economy produces about 60% of the sub-region's total income. On the other hand, Yemen represents about 80% of sub-region's population, only 5% of the total income. The richer countries bordering the Persian Gulf sit on huge oil reserves, and exploiting this reserve has brought high incomes. These countries have small total population and rely on immigrant labor. Wealth is not distributed widely or evenly among their populations, either through increased wages or through social services such as education and healthcare. The many low-wage jobs and much of the commerce, especially in retailing and healthcare, are left to Indians and other Asian immigrants. The small oil-poor countries of Lebanon, Jordan, and especially Yemen are much less developed. They have more available labor and some capacity for agriculture. Iraq and Syria are the exceptions to this rich-poor duality. Until the mid-1980s, they both had oil revenues, significant water resources and agriculture, and large labor force. The Iran-Iraq War, the Gulf War, and subsequent UN sanctions, and the US invasion in 2003. However, almost Iraq's economy, though it is now rebuilding. Next, we can proceed to Israel and Palestinian territories. Israel's economy is diversified. The agriculture sector, using intensive irrigation and irrigation farming methods, produces fruits, vegetables, and flowers for export to Europe, but now constitute only 2.5% of total GDP. Israel possesses a well-educated workforce and access to foreign aid and investment, providing a sophisticated defense capability prepared a generation of engineers for work in Israel's high-technology industries. Although the influx of Russian Jews in the early 1990s generated worries about rising unemployment, they brought professional skills and caused a new boom in house building. Manufactured goods make up 30% of export. Polish diamonds are the largest export, followed by chemicals, electronic, medical, and scientific equipment. Beginning in the 1990s, Israel became a major center and leader of high technology development and in manufacturing areas such as telecommunication, electronic printing, and more. Diagnostic imaging system for medicine and data communication are the main technology used by Israel. Most of the manufacturing industries are based around the coastal cities such as Tel Aviv and Haifa. Industrial estates along the borders with Gaza and the West Bank employ cheap Arab labor. Israel gains over 65% of its GDP from the service sector. Education and healthcare rank very high. The financial sector grows increasingly as Israel's economy opens to privatization and foreign investment. Tourism is a major industry that attracted over 2.6 million visitors in 2010, but is often disrupted by conflict and war. When possible, many visitors also travel to such places such as Jerusalem, Petra in Jordan, and the pyramids in Egypt. About 35% of Israel exports go to the United States, with much of the remainder going to European countries and Hong Kong. Israel has high trade deficits and owes much of its external debt to the United States. Israel also by far the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid, receiving well over 3.2 billion US dollar in some economic and mostly military aid every year. The US government also gives other financial aid such as loans. Next, we're going to proceed to Turkey and Iran. The two countries have different types of economic development based largely on oil income for Iran and water resources for Turkey. With over 10% of world oil reserve, Iran experienced rapid oil income growth from 1960s, reaching 40% of the value of national production in the oil boom of 1970s. Much of the additional wealth was at first spent on encouraging urban, industrial rather than agricultural expansions and importing foreign goods. The takeover of the country by religious leaders in 1979, US sanctions and the war with Iraq in 1980s led to isolation from the world. The low oil prices of the 1980s and 1990s worsened Iran's financial position. In 1990s, however, Iran began to look outward and restructure its economy and world connections. The country sought links with major multinational oil corporations for marketing and technical ability, but Iran's constitution forbids foreigners from owning mineral concessions. Although Iran possesses other mineral resources, few have been explored or extracted. In the early 2000s, the Iranian government invested in nuclear power plants but was condemned by the United States for such activities because nuclear technology employed to generate electricity also can be easily used to develop nuclear weapons. However, the Russian government is helping Iran to develop its nuclear power industry. Turkey has little oil but invested heavily in the development of its water resources for more agriculture output and hydroelectricity. Industrial expansion increased from 1950 and especially in the 1970s and 1980s. The 1990s were a period of political and economic confusion, partly due to the internal war against the Kurds that absorbed large amounts of money and manpower, while Iranian national income fluctuated after 1980 with world oil prices. Turkey's real income grew steadily to exceed that of Iran until the late of 1990s, partly as a consequence of lower oil prices and the sanctions affecting Iran. Rising oil prices in the 2000s have helped Iran's GNI PPP to grow more quickly than Turkey's, helping to close the gap in national incomes between the two countries. Next, the current issue for each sub-regions. For North Africa, independent Algeria has been ruled by democratically elected governments with socialist policies based on central planning. After the fundamentalist Islamic Salvation Front (FIS) had a strong showing in the first round of elections in December 1991, the military intervened, cancelled the second round of voting, and banned all religiously based political parties, which included the FIS. A civil war erupted between the army and guerrilla groups. Terrorist activities and army repression through the 1990s devastated Algeria's economy and people, with over 100,000 deaths, and the army's destruction of the FIS as a political party. The war essentially ended in 2002 after the most of the remnants of the remaining guerrilla groups disbanded, surrendered, or accepted amnesty. Protests in the Kabylie region along the coast in 2001 resulted in the government recognizing Berber as a national language, which is now taught in schools. Elections held in 1999, 2004, 2009 all have been won by Abdelaziz Bouteflika, which is backed by the military of Morocco, has political stability under its moderate but strongly involved king, Mohammed V. Mohammed VI. His predecessor, King Hassan II, introduced gradual political reforms in the 1990s and gained international Muslim credibility through his mediating role in Arab issues and the construction of a massive new mosque. By 2002, the United Nations had proposed a plan that seemed to accept Moroccan control with limited local autonomy and a referendum in Western Sahara that would include all residents, such as the recent settlers from Morocco, while UN weakens. So does that of Polisario's supporter, the Algerian government, which was bought off by French aid. For the Nile River Valley, the year 1952 marked a turning point in Egypt's modern history. After centuries of Ottoman and then British domination, Egypt sought its full independence and became a socialist state with new priorities focused on its own internal needs. President Abdel Nasser hoped Egypt would lead the Arab world, aiming for a few years combine Egypt and Syria in a single country, targeting the Soviet Union to help build the Aswan High Dam on the Nile River. He exploited Cold War politics. As in other countries in the region, lack of political freedoms, corruption, political brutality, slow economic growth and stagnation, and a rapidly growing population that is swelling the ranks of young people, particularly university graduates who are unable to find jobs, has proven to be a volatile mix. When such conditions led to protests that toppled the government in Tunisia in mid-January 2011, Egyptians were inspired to do the same. As of the writing of this book, sudden and massive protests in Egypt caused Mubarak to resign in February 2011 in an attempt to appease the protesters. For Arab Southwest Asia, in Syria, however, despite widespread initial protests and calls for a change in leadership, President Bashar al-Assad not only refused to step down, but violently opposed protesters. Syria has been ruled by the Ba'ath political party, a socialist and nationalist group seeking Arab unity since the 1960s. Bashar al-Assad was elected president under a 2000 referendum in Iran and reigned unopposed, even some indicator of the lack of political freedom in the country. Soldiers were ordered to open fire on civilian protesters and many were killed or tortured. Eventually, the country declined into civil war, with the government fighting rebel groups who sought to overthrow it and civilians caught in the crossfire. The civil war in Syria also offered an opportunity for another group in the region to control of territory. ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, also known as the Islamic State in Iraq and Levant, ISIL, or just the Islamic State IS, emerged in 2014 as a Sunni extremist group opposing the United States invasion of Iraq. Iraq had been ruled by minority Sunni population for centuries, but with the overthrow of then President Saddam Hussein, also a member of a Ba'ath party, the majority Shia population took control. Efforts to create a coalition between government and include Sunnis as well as the other minority groups in the country broke down. Some of the Sunnis who had been political leaders or military personnel under Saddam Hussein formed ISIS and were eventually able to drive out Iraqi government forces in several key cities. From there, the group gained control of the parts of Syria. For some time, much of Iraq and Syria existed as an insurgent state, a territory beyond the control of government forces. ISIS is widely known for its brutal tactics, including beheadings, sexual violence, and fundamentalist interpretation of Islam. The group sought to create a worldwide Islamic state with every Muslim country under its control. The United States declared ISIS defeated in 2019, though researchers note that while the US indeed took control of the large pieces of territories held by ISIS, thousands of ISIS fighters remain dispersed across Iraq and Syria, and the group has the support of other affiliate groups and fighters across the world. Since 2011, the people of Syria have endured government assaults, violence from rebel groups, and attacks from ISIS. Over 400,000 Syrians have been killed, many of them civilians, and over 30 million have become refugees. Some refugees have remained in Syria, cut off from it by government and insurgent groups. Around 4.8 million have been left Syria. Some have fled to Turkey and Greece by boat and have died on the perilous journey. Europe and North America have debated whether to accept these migrants, with some countries arguing that Syrian migrants might actually be terrorists, and others acknowledging that the global community has a responsibility to help those in need. Next, we're going to proceed to Israel and Palestinian territories. On May 14, 1948, Israel was officially declared a state, marking the first Jewish state in over 2,000 years. Just one day later, war broke out between Israel and 5 Arab countries: Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and Lebanon. At the end of this conflict, known as 1948 Arab-Israel War, Egypt was given control of the Gaza Strip. In the aftermath of the war, scholars estimate that more than 700,000 Palestinians left or were forced to flee their homes in the newly formed Jewish Israel. Thousands of Palestinian refugees settled in the Gaza Strip. Many were essentially trapped between two countries, Egypt and Israel, that would not grant them easy passage. As of 2018, most of the Palestinian inhabitants are the original 1948 war refugees and their descendants, many of them still living in refugee camps. An Islamist political group called Hamas won elections and took control of Gaza in 2006. Since then, Hamas has occupied the Strip, which has become a site for protests, bombings, land assaults, and other acts of violence. Israel and the United States, as well as several other countries, consider Hamas a terrorist organization. Palestinians in Gaza don't have an official army, but they do possess thousands of guns, rockets, and other weapons. Since Israel controls the Gaza coastline and all entry points into the region, experts believe many of these weapons are smuggled into the region or provided by anti-Israeli allies in other countries, such as Iran. Three major conflicts between Israel and Hamas have taken place in Gaza since 2005. Operation Case Lead between 2008 and 2009 and Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012 were in response to rapid fire over the Gaza-Israel border, while the kidnapping and murdering of three Israeli teenagers by two Hamas members sparked a 7-week conflict known as Operation Protective Edge in 2014. From March 30, 2018 to May 15, 2018, Palestinians in Gaza took part in a planned protest called the Great March of Return, organized to raise awareness for refugees' rights and coinciding with the relocation of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Tensions escalated, adding to the growing list of violent confrontations that have taken place on the Gaza Strip. Despite numerous peace efforts, the territory has been characterized by instability and warfare and continues to remain a volatile region. Next sub-region is Turkey and Iran. For Turkey, on March 13, 2013, the Kurdistan Works Party (PKK) released 8 Turkish soldiers and civil servants. The captives were kidnapped in 2011 and 2012 and held by the Kurdish militants in the mountains of northern Iraq. The PKK has been using forms of guerrilla warfare against Turkey for almost 3 decades. After months of talks with the Turkish government, imprisoned PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan in March 2013 declared a ceasefire and ordered Kurdish fighters to withdraw from Turkey and retreat to Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region. The announced optimism for peace was short-lived, however, and the ceasefire fell apart in September. The PKK claimed that the Turkish government had not followed through on promise to negotiate with the Kurds. In October, Erdogan unveiled a package of reforms in late September aimed at reopening a dialogue with the Kurds. The reforms including lifting a ban on teaching the Kurdish language in private schools, allowing villagers to reclaim their Kurdish names, and making it easier for Kurds to elect to parliament. Many Kurds, however, said the reforms did not go far enough. In particular, they bemoaned the fact the reforms did not include revising the country's anti-terrorism laws, which have landed thousands of Kurdish activists in jail. In addition, the package included returning confiscated property to Israel Orthodox Christian and easing restrictions on women wearing headscarf in public. Many believe the package was an attempt by Erdogan to restore confidence among Turks ahead of 2014 elections. Next, for Iran, the 2019-2020 Persian Gulf crisis is an intensification of military tensions between the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies, and the United States of America and their allies in the Persian Gulf region. The US began a build-up of its military presence in the region to deter an alleged planned campaign by Iran and its non-state allies to attack American forces and interests in the Persian Gulf and Iraq. This followed a rise in political tensions between the two countries during the Trump administrations, which included the withdrawal of the US from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), the imposition of new sanctions between Iran and the designation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) as a terrorist organization. In response, Iran designated the United States Central Command as a terrorist organization. Next, we're gonna proceed to political history in each sub-region. For North Africa, in the 800 BC, the coast was settled by traders from the East Mediterranean who established the Kingdom of Carthage. This was conquered by Rome, then overrun by Vandals in the AD 400s but retaken by the Christian Byzantines. Arabs invaded in the AD 600s, converted the local Berber tribes to Islam, and imposed a new way of life. The Muslim invasion of Spain followed in 711, producing the architectural riches of Cordoba, Seville, and Granada as reflections of the wealth and civilization they brought, including toleration of local Christians and Jews. By 1500, internal divisions and weaker control allowed Spanish Christians to expel the Muslims, forcing over 1 million to move back to North Africa from the 1000s. Pirate groups control most of the sub-region's port cities. The coast, apart from Morocco, became known as Barbary Coast, making the Western Mediterranean dangerous for merchant shipping and contributing to the decline of Mediterranean ports in southern Europe. The pirates continued their activities even after the Ottoman Empire took control of this area in the 1500s. During the 1800s, European countries and the United States stopped the pirate attacks, and France annexed territory in Algeria and later in Tunisia in Morocco. In Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, French settlers and local people established commercial farms that grew citrus fruits and produced wine for European markets. The settlers took political and administrative control of the colonies. After World War II, nationalist groups fought for and obtained independence in 1956 in Morocco and Tunisia, and 1962 in Algeria. Libya remained poor, a mainly desert area of little economic or political outside interest until Italy occupied it in 1911. Next, for Nile River Valley, the earliest Egyptian empire dominated the lower Nile River Valley from around 3200 BC. The centers at Memphis in the north and Thebes in the south of modern Egypt expanded influence over the Nubian kingdom in the area of modern Sudan. The complex imperial history ended when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC, and the Romans and Byzantines imposed control up to 8500s. During the latter part of this period, the Christian Coptic Church spread through the area and southward into Ethiopia. In the 8600s, Muslims Arabs conquered Egypt, but they did not fully control the area of modern Sudan until the 1500s. Later, Mongols and Turks invaded Egypt, and it became of the part of the Ottoman Empire in the 1500s. Egypt's position at a crossroads of international trade brought some prosperity to its markets. In the 1800s, the United Kingdom and France fought for control of the country. The British encouraged farmers to grow cotton for British textile mills. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 enhanced Egypt's strategic position and France's involvement, but the British then occupied Egypt until the latter gained full independence in 1952. After becoming a Muslim country in the 1500s, Sudan extended its territory southward, although many of the tribes in the southern area retained their traditional belief and some became Christians. In the 1800s, Egyptian forces attacked Sudan, but it held out until the British joined in an 1899 invasion. After this, Sudan came under the joint control of the United Kingdom and Egypt. British engineers constructed irrigation works in Jazeera area south of the junction between the White Nile and Blue Nile rivers. Next, we can proceed to Arab Southwest Asia. The governments of the countries in this sub-region vary, but few have been democratic. Many of the oil-rich countries remain dominated by ruling families or dictators. Saudi Arabia is the only country named after a family, the Sauds, who all rule with the title of king and support a huge range of related princes. Other Gulf countries have sheikhs, emir, and sultan with similar roles, and Jordan has a king. Syria has military dictatorship. Until the fall of Saddam Hussein, Iraq had military dictatorship, but is now moving toward democracy. In Lebanon, a greater degree of democracy now exists after a destructive civil war in the 1980s and 1990s between the Muslim and Christian groups spurred on by Islamic extremists, although Syria still exerts a major influence. Despite tight rule, Arab governments have not been immune to democratic protests that began in Tunisia and spread. Some promised reform, while others cracked down on protests harshly. In either circumstance, change has not come quickly or easily. Syria's dictatorship under Hafiz Assad lasted for 30 years. The minority Shiite Alawi people took control of the army and the Socialist Ba'ath Party, supported by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Syria fostered extremist groups that took part in the Lebanese Civil War and in actions against Israel and European countries. After the Soviet connection ended in 1991, Syria's inward-looking economy suddenly sought to enter the global economic system. Privatized business expanded their activities. However, the poor banking system and lack of political freedom attracted little foreign investment, and economic growth stood still as the population increased. Following Hafiz Assad's death in 2000, his son Bashar slowly relaxed the government's tight grip on society and the economy. When democratic protests began in Tunisia at the end of 2010 and spread to Egypt, Bashar Assad indicated that he would initiate reforms. However, as protests began and grew stronger in Syria, he responded with deadly force. Next, we're gonna proceed to Israel and Palestinian territories. Arab countries refused to accept the existence of independent Israel and fought it unsuccessfully again in 1956, 1967, and 1973. During the 1967 war, Israel extended its territory southward into the Gaza Strip and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula eastward across the West Bank area of Jordan and northward out to the Golan Heights of Syria. Despite UN resolutions, Israel refused to give up the occupied lands apart from Sinai. For security reasons, Israel wanted surrounding countries to accept the existence of Israel and renounce military activity against it. Syria would not acknowledge Israel's existence, so Israel held into the Golan Heights, with Arab countries failing to advance the Palestinian cause through open warfare. Yasser Arafat was able to assume leadership of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO. Though accepting aid from Arab states, he advocated guerrilla warfare to enable Palestinians to achieve independence on their own terms. In 1994, following the Oslo Accord between Israel and the PLO, the Palestinian Authority was established and given limited jurisdiction and autonomy in Gaza and the West Bank. After decades of conflict over the position and status of a Jewish state, many outside the situation see an almost insoluble problem. A further cause of tension is that although Israel proclaimed Jerusalem to be its capital in 1950 and both Knesset, which is parliament, in Jerusalem suburbs, the United States and most countries do not recognize Jerusalem as the Israel capital and maintain embassies in Tel Aviv. The democratically elected Israel government reflects the complex grouping of interests, conservative and liberal, religious and secular, as well as those of varied origins. One of the consequences of prolonged conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has been increased political and religious polarization. Early leaders on both sides tended to be secular, with either nationalist or socialist views. For example, Israel's first prime ministers, including Ben-Gurion, came from the Labour Party or from parties with similar interests. Under the leadership of Yasser Arafat, Fatah and the Palestinian Liberation Organization (PLO) were also secular with nationalist goals. Many strongly pious, Orthodox and fundamentalist believers among Israelis and Palestinians tended to avoid politics. However, as the conflicts intensified, this changed. Beginning in the late 1970s, religious Zionist political parties increasingly exerted control in Israel. Among the supporters who were settlers in the West Bank and Gaza, in the 1980s, Hamas emerged within the PLO. For the last sub-regions, which is Turkey and Iran, in the early 1900s, Iran was ruled by a Shah who had elevated himself from a military career to royal status. He and his successor son kept the country largely under military control, but with a semblance of freedom to adopt Western education and develop a wider range of economic activities. Iran's oil wealth and control of the Strait of Hormuz resulted in involvement with the global economy, but in less economic diversification at home. Though the economy of Iran grew under the Shah, he was a repressive leader and resentment toward him grew. In 1979, nationalist religious leaders led by the Ayatollah Khomeini seized political power. The Shah fled and Iran shifted to Islamic religious leadership. Because the US government supported the Shah and refused to turn him over to stand trial, anti-American feelings grew in Iran, culminating with their taking of hostages at the American embassy in Tehran. The new constitution of the Islamic Republic in Iran depends on a Shiite interpretation of Islamic government. Clergy are expected to establish a just social system and implement Islamic laws. In practice, the system raises tensions between the president and the members of Islamic Assembly, Majlis, all of whom depend on a popular vote. On the other hand, and the religious priorities of the controlling Council of Leadership on the other. Iran's rapid population growth over recent decades has resulted in a country with a huge percentage of young people who, dissatisfied with unemployment and lack of freedom, greatly desire reform. Elections in 1997 and 2000 brought reforms into office, but their efforts to reform were blocked by conservatives who still had much power. A hardliner by the name of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad became president in 2005. Discontent grew and erupted into massive protests and accusations of voter fraud when he was re-elected in 2009. Internationally, Ahmadinejad is known as a controversial figure for denying the Holocaust and pursuing a nuclear program, which causes the United States to lead an international effort to plan sanctions on Iran. Turkey's political system is very different from that of Iran. After the disastrous defeat of the Ottoman Empire in World War I, Turkey became a nationalist and secular republic, putting the country before religion in questions of government. From the 1920s until 1936, the new leader, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, ruled with a single-party government.